waste product. They started selling waste product as fillers into our food system, into makeup, into all sorts of things. They're not the only ones to do it,
right.
But a lot of industrial waste gets into our food in the US simply because as long as the FDA, by the way, if you have an organization that says food and drug in the same statement, we may have a problem. Food for thought.
All right, guys, he is back. Sebastian, welcome back.
Thank you, my friend. Excited to be here.
What's changed in the past year for you?
Well, I moved my family, completed a 10-year goal, and moved my family up back to the Pacific Northwest where I grew up. I left a small town about 3,000 people, knowing I would eventually come back. But I think especially for young men, but probably for everyone, I think it's important to go out into the world and get away from where you grew up,
right?
At least for a season. So I knew I'd do that, and I knew I'd probably end up back there because I absolutely love it, and I wanted to bring what I had learned back to help. And so I'm excited. I'm excited to be back in the community there. We started our homestead. Went from living in Southern California, which we still have a place down there, but to having chickens and ducks and turkeys, and about to have some cows, and planted 50 fruit trees and got our garden in. So
amazing.
I'm more on like potatoes and onions, and when the time you're getting your leafy vegetables in the ground right now.
Yeah, that's how it should be, man. I
agree.
I want to one day live off only the community.
That is my goal. My goal is by 2025, by the end of 2025, 80% of the food we're eating, we're the only ones that's touched.
Wow.
And the goal is to create a model. That's generally my frame for how to show up in this world is don't tell people what you're going to do, go do it. Right? Show people, because that's the easiest way to get over all the
a lot of talkers.
A lot of talkers. Go do it. So that's my goal. I was in a bee suit yesterday, so that was fun.
Bee suit?
Yeah, we got our first hive. We'll have multiple hives, but it's pretty crazy to have fruit trees and not have bees.
Right.
They're hugely important. So we'll have our own honey, which would be sweet, and then they will obviously help pollinate all of our fruit. And it's a hack. I'm not a doctor. I don't play on the internet. But if you have allergies, if you get local honey and you put local honey on your food, there's a good chance it'll help minimize some of your allergies because you're getting introduced to those pollens in a different form that your body seems to accept better.
Wow, that's major. There's a lot of people with allergies.
Especially this time of year.
You're seeing kids have like strawberry allergies, all these foods now.
It's
just
like
tragic.
Yeah.
They can't experience strawberries.
Yeah, that's a nightmare.
That's my favorite fruit. Growing up for me, it was just like peanut. That was it. Now there's like so many allergies.
I know.
Why do you think that is?
I think our food system is. I don't think it's the food. I think it's our system. I think the more research I do, the more I'm concerned. Like I'm as a fundamental principle, I guess, I'm still very pro-capitalism, mostly because I don't think we have a better economic system as a choice. I think there are, in theory or idealistically, better choices, but it will require a different level of human consciousness to have them work. Right. So communism gets a lot of heat right now, and for, I think, good reason. But Karl Marx would roll over in the grave if he knew what people made of communism. It is nowhere near what his intention was.
Yeah.
And when he wrote the Communist Manifesto, he thought, hey, 3 countries have a shot at this. England, France, and maybe this new country, this emerging country called the United States.
Right.
And obviously that's not who adopted it. But capitalism has been, it's a double-edged sword, but it has been arguably the greatest economic system in world history, and has eliminated poverty and brought more clean water and energy and things to the world than any other system, and that's not disputed.
Right.
The downside to it is what we could call late-stage capitalism, but that may be a little bit lazy, just an uninvolved, unintended consequence of capitalism is everything becomes about profit, right? And when everything becomes about profit and not people, we're in big trouble.
Yep.
So look at our healthcare system. It's because it's about profit, not about people. Look at our education system. It's because it's not about learning, it's about money. Same with our food system. So the Rockefellers, oil, they weren't the first ones to do this, by the way, but they had all of this excess petroleum byproduct, and it cost money to get rid of it until they found out, oh, there's vitamins in here, vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E. And so instead of getting rid of their waste product, they started selling waste product as fillers into our food system, into makeup, into all sorts of things. They're not the only ones to do it,
right.
But a lot of industrial waste gets into our food in the US simply because as long as the FDA, by the way, if you have an organization that says food and drug in the same statement, we may have a problem. Just food for thought.
They should separate those probably.
Probably, yeah. But anyway, if there's like, hey, it's neutral or it isn't harmful, they could put X amount of filler in food. So we have a lot of filler in our foods that you don't get when you go to other parts of the world. Like if you go to Europe, every time I thought this was an accident, but the first time I went there, I was surprised how good I felt after eating a meal. Yeah. I was like, why? I feel lighter. I feel more energy. And then I realized, oh, their food quality is a hell of a lot better than ours.
Right.
So I think
that's crazy because we're one of the wealthiest countries.
Exactly. But everything's driven by money. And so what is most profitable is not always what's most beneficial. That's the problem. So I'm a big proponent of conscious capitalism, which is something that I'm spending more of my time talking about and will, where it's not just about money, it's also about people.
Right.
And that really started shifting in the 70s. As far as I could tell, it was probably there the whole way through because some of it's human nature. But it really, late 70s, early 80s is where that pivot really went hard into just profit. And we're reaping the pain of it now.
Right. Do you think conscious capital at scale is possible?
Totally. But it takes a conscious human being. So first things first, that's my kind of frame in how I show up in the world is what is the one thing that if I solve for, solves for the most other things? We need awake human beings, aware human beings. So hopefully my first book will be out this year. I've been tediously working on it, but and it's all about awareness.
Right.
96% of people get tested, exclaim that they're aware, and 85% of people are not.
Wow.
Which should tell you everything you need about human awareness.
That's funny. That's ironic.
Yeah.
What would
for themselves.
How would you consider someone aware? Like, what would they need to be doing?
There's two components of awareness. One is inner awareness. So you're aware of your beliefs, you're aware of your programming, you're aware of your emotional conditions and what you're emotionally experiencing. That's one component. And then the other component is you are aware of the other. So you walk into a room, you can read the room well. You understand the emotional state of the room or the emotional state of an individual or what they're experiencing, or at deeper levels, how someone is experiencing you. And most humans can't solve for themselves, and because they don't have a way to solve for themselves, they're left looking at the world and seeing it as the problem. So most humans have a victim mindset in which they see themselves through the lens of life is happening to me because they have no way to solve for themselves. And if you can't solve for yourself, the only other option is to look out and go, this is happening to me. The world is happening to me.
Right.
One of the big ahas in life is when we begin to realize, how am I complicit in creating the reality I say I don't want? How am I responsible for this? How is how I'm showing up having an impact on my experience? And I would suggest to your listeners that we're a three-part being, and by design, our spirit is creating our world. Our mind, which you hear a lot of self-help people talk about, is manifesting our world, and our body is experiencing that creation by design. And when we deeply understand that, there's some pretty profound implication to it.
That's fascinating. I've heard of spirit and body, but I've never heard of that third part, the mind you're mentioning. So you think that's the subconscious?
It's all of it. That's the tool that we've been given to interface in this realm is our mind. So it gives us the tools to interface in the first three dimensions. Spirit's ability to interface in the first three dimensions, which is a heavily dense dimension.
So the spirit is multidimensional, you think?
100%.
So it could travel between...
Yes. We're everywhere.
Yeah.
All the time. But this is a anchoring point. And as we I have a 6-month-old son, and it's been fun to watching. He's my third son, and getting to watch him grow up. And you see it. If you're looking for it, you can see it. Like, we drop in fully spiritually aware, and then we get indoctrinated into body. And that's what the struggle is, learning how to contain who we are inside of this structure by design. Right. And it's frustrating. And I would offer spirit is not housed inside of body. Body is housed inside of spirit.
Yeah.
Our spiritual emanation, our energy is much, much bigger than our physical 100%.
As I reflect on my years growing up, you realize how much of it was by design. It's pretty crazy. Yeah. Between school, even the birthing process in the hospital, all the bright lights.
Interesting, right?
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy to look back on and just not even be aware that was happening.
Yeah.
I didn't wake up till probably last year, so 25 years.
Yeah. Well, one of my clients, and I would love to know what the conditions were that led you to wake up. It does seem like people are waking up faster, which I'm very, very excited about it. I hate to use a qualitative statement there because it's not relevant to speed or time. It is what it is. But it's interesting. There's usually something that provokes it, like a big reset in somebody's life. Like I have a client who had a heart attack and it totally reset her nervous system. And then it's like she woke up different.
Yeah.
And I see that as a pretty consistent theme, as people have these huge nervous system resets, and it gives them an opportunity to recalibrate. And then, what am I identifying with? What is it that, like, how am I seeing my world? Because it gives them just enough to kind of re-reference their worldview.
Right, like a near-death experience.
Near-death experience, the loss of a loved one, bankruptcy, severe sickness. There's a handful of them that are pretty consistent. Something that is just so tragic, it just resets the whole system.
Right. It's crazy that it takes that, though, to be able to do that, because that's not scalable.
Well, maybe not, but it does seem to be hidden in our code, our energetic code, which is where the old phrase comes from. People don't change until staying the same is more painful than changing. It does seem like somewhere built into the system is a soft reset button, a condition that creates a soft reset, or in some cases a hard reset.
Right.
And I think that's probably by design.
Yeah. Do you think there's an end goal to all this, or do you think it's just
totally
keep leveling up?
Yes. I would offer that God seeks infinite expression, and so is constantly creating conditions for infinite expression.
Elaborate on that.
Well, at any moment in time, I'll step back, create some frames here. At any moment in time, our birthright is to return to oneness. Nobody would come to this planet if you could not leave it. Right? So humans have and albeit probably obvious, weird kind of relationship with death.
Very.
Right? But it's somewhat hilarious because you wouldn't come here if you could not leave it.
Right.
Right? Nobody would sign up for this if it's like, yeah, you're here for good. And that happened, whether it was an allegory or a true story. The Bible references this in Genesis, right? There were two trees in the Garden of Eden. And it's worth noting, again, whether you have a religious background or care about religion or not, there is an analogy here or an allegory here that is worth understanding, whether you say, hey, this actually happened, or whether it's a story to help understand why things are the way they are. But there were two trees in the garden. One was the knowledge of good and evil. That's the expression of duality. The other one was the tree of life, eternal physical life. Well, if they ate of the second one, they would have been stuck in duality forever, right? So they got booted from the garden because that was a loving expression. That wasn't punishment. That's like, no, you eat the other tree and you're screwed. Eat through from the other tree. So what that did was create duality, which is everything an opposite. Everything has an opposite.
Right.
Right? You can't have good without evil, can't have dark without light. But in oneness, there is no opposite. So and you can return to oneness whenever you want. And sometimes people get a glimpse of it either through deep meditation or prayer or a psychedelic experience. There's lots of ways that people return to oneness in a moment or taste of it and remember, and in some cases create the unraveling of learning, right, into unlearning. But that really is the work. And so the infinite expression is an understanding that you have an opportunity as a single expression of the infinite expression to live out potentiality of all the infinite potentials that are there. And that, to me, seems to be the point, to be the loving expression in all of its forms.
Interesting. So that just continues on and on then?
As far as I can tell.
Yeah, because I've done past life therapy and I've had 500 or something lives. So
as far as I can tell, it's fairly new. And as far as I can tell, the intent is in all of them to choose love. In the end.
Choose love. What do you mean by that?
To not have a choice to love is not love. Right? If you had no choice but to love, if that was your only choice, that is not love.
Right, it's forced.
Right. Love can only be loved when it is willfully expressed.
Got it.
Chosen. So we are presented with an incredible, immense amount of opportunities to continually choose love. And as far as I can tell, through our lifetimes, the leveling up process is the resolving of and remembering love, returning to love in all cases, which is why when you do past life therapy and regression therapy, you'll go back in and integrate energetically, karmically, those areas that were not healed, were not dealt with, so that you can continually ascend, which is ultimately surrendering the illusion of separation. There's three major illusions that humans have to confront, and it usually goes in this order, but not always. The first one is the illusion of control. That's usually the one that goes first, but not always, which is this idea that we can control anything other than ourselves. It is an insane idea that we could control anything other than ourselves.
Yeah, like it's not possible.
The weather, as an example. Whatever but think about this. If people went outside every Friday and burnt 90% of their paycheck, would they be pumped? No. That's horrific. It's horrible. But think about how many people spend 90% of their energy burned up on things that they have no material impact on. And my correlation, I do notice those who are good with managing their energy and time tend to be good at managing their money. There are exceptions, of course, because that's human. But to me, money is simply it's a way that we store time and energy. Right? It's a way to store up time and energy, and we will exchange money for our time and energy back in different endeavors.
Yeah.
Okay? So how many people are squandering their energy, which is their life source, into things that they have no control over?
A lot.
Bickering, gossiping.
Yeah.
A lot. It's a very normal human condition. Tragic, right? So surrendering the illusion of control is you wake up to the reality that the only thing I can control is me, how I respond, how I deal with the life, the choices I make. I can't deal with anything else. Once you do that, there's a peace that comes with that. But that's a hard one. So that's usually the first one that goes, the illusion of control. The second one is usually the illusion of separateness or specialness, right? We are 99.9% the same, and yet we want to dick around with the tiny minutia of things that make us separate as humans. And it's so wild. We're still such a primitive species.
Right.
We still deal with things with force and violence and control. And we treat people like they're separate from us when they are like that's the great illusion, when you can surrender this idea that you are separate from the other.
So you're talking about race, religion,
all of it. So, or judging the other, right? That which you judge judges you back.
Right.
And that which you judge, you create separation from, which means you remove your ability to influence. So I'll ask people, I had a client we were doing some work with around her mother, and I said, if you were your mother and you grew up in the exact conditions she did, would you be any different? And of course she immediately said, yes, of course I would. Judgment. When you begin to surrender this idea of separateness, you would realize, no, I would not. Right? And you would see in her what is in you. It's the test.
Right.
Can you pass the test? When two people walk in a room and they meet somebody, one thinks they're the other one doesn't.
See that all the time.
Who's the
right?
It's the test. So you see in others what is in you. If it's not in you, you can't see it. Right? That's generally the egoic. So anyway, specialness, separateness, we could spend a lot of time just on that talk, but just an overview. That's the second one to go. And usually the last one to go is the idea of duality, surrendering the idea of duality, which, by the way, is a useful construct in this realm. It isn't meant to say that it's a negative one, but you'll get to a point where it's no longer as useful.
So what does that duality look like?
Duality is this idea of right and wrong. Everything is right and wrong. Anybody who's participated in religion has ultimately at some point realized how much of an hypocrite they are because of duality, right? You just will, because you'll get to a point where you recognize I'm cutting off my nose to spite my face because of my religious belief system. I'm putting everything as either right or wrong. And as we get older, very often we realize, oh, there's a lot of gray. But we love to think everything is either right or wrong. And that's generally religious people, which is why they seem very judgmental and very hypocritical. And if they live long enough, they will become the hypocrite because you are living in hypocrisy. You have to, if you see in right and wrong. So Paul in the New Testament brought this up, and my Christian folk won't like me saying this, but he said it in Corinthians. He was arguing with Paul, or Peter was arguing with him over, hey, should we make Christians participate in Jewish law? And he said, all things are lawful, Not all things are beneficial. And the context is very clear what he was talking about. But what he was saying is we're past right and wrong. Consciousness is moving past right and wrong. That was the work that Christ did, which that's a whole interesting conversation, but that was the work he did, we're dissolving this idea of right and wrong. Now, depending on your level of consciousness, what you may hear, and I'll hear people say when I say this, so I could just go rob a bank, there's nothing wrong with that? No, you missed it. I could murder somebody, it's okay? No, you missed it. When you remove right and wrong, the frame then becomes what is most beneficial. And we know this, right? Because if you look at the 10 Commandments, one of them is thou shalt not kill, but yet God commanded death in the Old Testament a whole bunch of places. Is God a hypocrite?
Right.
Right? To the Christian community. But anyway, so it's understanding in the frame of what is most beneficial instead of this idea that everything is either right or wrong all of the time.
That one will be hard to remove from a lot of people just because of the way of parenting and schooling.
And because it's a lazy way to teach. It's a very effective way to teach people. It just keeps them trapped. Right. And again, anybody who's lived right and wrong long enough, look at people who are deeply religious, deeply legalistic, deeply into this idea of right and wrong. They become the hypocrite at some point. It's inevitable.
Wow, that's ironic.
There's no way out of it.
Yeah. So there's theories that the soul chooses your life, right? Chooses your parents. How much of our lives do you think is predetermined? Like us meeting, do you think that's predetermined or what's that conscious choice?
Well, that's an interesting perspective. So once you leave the third dimension, once you leave the fourth dimension, everything is now. So you can see everything in now. There is no beginning and end. Everything is just now, which means from that perspective, everything is seen in a moment and is known in that moment. Does it make sense?
Just living in the present, basically?
The present is, or the elongated now.
So no past, no future, you're saying?
Correct.
Okay.
Past and future are, this is a struggle for the way the mind works, but are largely illusions. They don't exist. The only moment that has ever existed is now.
Huh.
You didn't do something in the past, you did it now. You just recorded it, and then your mind referenced it as a past moment of now.
So what about history then?
A past moment of now.
So all that's happening right now.
It all happened in a...
Interesting.
Once you leave the fourth dimension, everything just exists. So if we talked about Jasenia, but if you talk to people who we'll say are able to commune with people who are no longer in body, some were never in body, some left their body, right? And some people will go, that's witchcraft. And it's, a lot of people have their own opinions of all that, which is, I think it's hilarious. Actually, for their Christians and listeners, you can go check out Saul going and talking to Samuel, who had already passed away. And Samuel was like, why are you talking to me? I left this plane. So there's certainly biblical representation for that exact thing. But nonetheless, when somebody leaves the body, they are generally, not always, but if they're hanging out and they're present, there's certain things that become apparent to them again. One of them is we are not separate from God. So when you talk to HEBs or they're highly evolved beings, you're talking to people that are no longer in body that are communing with you, which is always kind of a crazy topic for some people, but some other people are like, yeah, I've been doing that my whole life. Yeah. So a couple of things they struggle with is this idea of time, especially if they've never been in body, because time doesn't exist outside of this dimension, right? It's like, what is time? So when they say now, or they say something is happening now, we interpret that as now, but they see everything in now. So their time may not always be as accurate as we would like it to be, especially if they don't have a human reference. Some that have been in body understand that better because they've experienced time in body, so they'll be a little bit more accurate. The other one is this idea that we're separate from God. Also a baffling experience for them. It would be like saying you're separate, like you've never had a father. Like if somebody told you, yeah, I wasn't born by a father. I don't have a father. Well, just our biology is set up that, of course, we have a father. That is self-evident. So for especially those who've never existed here, they're like, wow, how could you believe you're separate from God? How could you believe that you aren't loved? Right? Those are baffling experiences, but that's because they've never experienced in time what this realm is, which is the ability to experience what would it be like to believe that God didn't exist. To all my atheist friends out there.
Interesting.
That's awesome. That is your birthright. You get to decide to experience what would my world be like if I thought that God didn't exist? What would my world be like if I got to believe that love didn't exist? Or whatever other story we want to make up. Whatever we want to, that's the infinite expression. Now, when we remove the idea of duality here, then we're thinking, okay, well, some of the best ways, some of the best truths are learned in action. So no longer are we thinking right and wrong. We're thinking, well, what is most beneficial? Is it most beneficial to think this way? What are the unintended and intended consequences of this line of thinking? Well, it's pretty easy to tell. We have a mental health crisis in our country right now, in Western society. It might be fun to start to entertain why that is. What are we doing that is, in a time that we could arguably say has never been better for more people, right? And some people that are struggling or frustrated by inflation or feel like they can't out-earn their cost of living, maybe go, that's but that's an easy sampling of history will tell you we are living in the best time for humans ever.
Right.
At least in our recorded history. Yes, I know. It's happened a few other times, but in this particular millennia, this is the best it's ever been.
Wow.
Yet, we have a mental health crisis. Why? I don't think it's one answer, but part of this is absolutely how we are framing our world.
I think so. Because in other times when we've been this prosperous, there wasn't a mental health crisis, right? This is the first time.
Well, some would say, well, we didn't have the tools to measure mental health, or mental health wasn't something that we even tracked. And that may be true. But we're seeing it generationally. Like mental health crisis among kids, or mental health issues among kids, so the generation below us is way higher. It's almost double what it is for adults.
Wow.
So it's like, hey, what's that all about? And we're treating a lot more with pharmaceutical solutions, right? Which treat symptoms, not problems.
Right.
And that tends to be the kind of the way we've moved in our society. We are far more interested in trading symptoms than problems. Probably, at least one of those reasons is it's far more lucrative to treat symptoms, not problems.
Way more lucrative.
Yeah, way more lucrative, which is unfortunate, right? And that's, again, this idea of conscious capitalism is putting people and profit on that scorecard.
Yeah.
I think as a business, you have to have profit. You may define what profit looks like differently, though. And maybe it's not just about how much money you're accumulating, which to me seems very primitive. But that's still the scorecard for most companies, is how much money are we accumulating? Well, couldn't we come up with something a little bit more creative, something a little bit more impactful than how much money we're accumulating? I don't know.
Yeah, you won't make 1,000x margins having a holistic company, but the social capital from that will be great.
And yeah, at some point it's like, hey, but here's the thing. To the younger generation that wants to and moan about it and hate on it, sitting on your bed tweeting your anger as a depressed young kid isn't going to do anything. Get your out of bed and go do something.
Right.
Go build the company you want the people to work at. Go build the company that's going to be a model of the future. Go do the thing you want other people to do. Don't just snivel and whine about it.
Yeah, it is pretty crazy seeing all these hate comments on social media. Like, I wonder if the world thought that way 20 years ago before social media and they just didn't have the platform to express it.
Social media is the expression of the collective conscious, but we have the technology of gods and still the brains of animals.
Yeah.
Right. We haven't evolved to be able to handle the technology yet. And so social media, for the most part, just feels like high school all over again.
For real.
I mean, it is. It's an expression of the true immaturity of human consciousness. And it gets unchecked because we're social animals. And so because we're so much more connected technologically, we're so much more triggered by what we're seeing. And now we're, as a group, agreeing with those experiences. Even though if you just get off your phone, you realize the world is not nearly as a horrible place as you would think it is just based on your social media experience.
Right.
And your neighbor is probably a kind, loving person more often than not. Right? Like,
yeah, they've weaponized it almost, right?
for sure. Yeah, and I don't know who the they are. I'm not much of I don't subscribe to conspiracy theories very much, mostly because I just don't think humans are that bright that they can demise these sorts of things. I think it's easier to express in that humans have very natural tendencies towards power and control to ensure resource control, which is a very normal, it's a human design element as far as I can tell.
Right.
So I don't need conspiracy theories to understand how we get here. But yeah, there's certainly, I think the unintended consequence of trying to capitalize on attention is that the human is designed to to disproportionately prefer negative information out of a survival context.
Interesting.
And so, unfortunately, because the system understands it, Freud brought this up, right? The father of psychology said that human behavior was largely driven by two things. Thanos and Eros is what he called them. Thanos is aggression, fear. Eros is sex. Weird. Look at all the marketing. It is one of two things.
Yep.
You're either getting sold on sex appeal, or you're getting sold on fear of loss.
They've sexualized women to the point where I can't even watch movies or TV shows anymore.
Anything.
It's crazy.
But it's because it works. Because the human design is to respond to those two things. And by its genius design, right? Well, why would we respond to sex? Sex ensures ensures procreation, which ensures the species continues to exist long enough to become conscious. Why aggression? Protection ensures that the species lives long enough to become conscious. So it is a design element. It's not, we have to grow through it, but I think the first thing we need to recognize is human is far more animal than we'd like to admit, right? And it is driven by those two things, which is why the marketing works. It will stop, like whoever they are will stop doing it when it no longer works. And it will stop working when humans wake up enough to go, I don't respond to that anymore.
Right.
When it doesn't work, follow the money. Something else will change that.
Agreed. So you think a lot of humans are controlled by their animal instincts?
They're not aware. 96% of humans believe they're aware. 85% of them are not.
That is crazy.
They're not aware. And they have no way to solve for themselves. So they're very easily impulsed, very easily controlled and manipulated by these things. And I don't think it's some nefarious group of evil doing, guys that want to control the world. Maybe, but I highly doubt that. I think human just figured out how to hack human. This is what we respond to. This is what works.
Well, it all comes down to money, too.
And it all comes down to money. Hey, this works. When we do this, we make X.
Right.
So keep doing
Always
that.
follow the money.
Just
Never
keep doing
lies.
100%.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy that.
But it will change when we raise in consciousness to a point where money isn't the only scorecard.
So in these evolutions that were highly spiritual in the past, what were they using as money?
So money, by definition, is simply something that a civilization or a group of people or a community commonly holds as valuable in exchange for goods and services. It could be seashells, it could be leaves, it could be tobacco, as I'm using real examples from other lifetimes, flowers, it could be anything. It could be cryptocurrency, which makes me laugh because for those who think because something is digital, it doesn't have value, that's silly.
Yeah, I love crypto.
Me too. The only thing that creates value is humans believing it has value.
Right.
Gold only has value because humans believe it has value. I'm not saying that there aren't it doesn't have technological value. It does. It has medicinal value, but it has value because we hold it as valuable. And there are contexts where gold would not be valuable. If we went to a reset, and I think Einstein, one of his more ominous questions, he was asked how he thought World War III would be fought.
Yeah.
And he goes, I'm not sure how World War III will be fought, but I'm pretty certain World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones, which he was just simply saying, we're likely going to reset. Well, when we reset, whatever that looks like, and I'm hopeful it'll be a peaceful reset, and I'm actually pretty hopeful and certain it will be. But if we reset back to a world in which you were prioritizing your survival, gold doesn't have value. What are you going to do? Gold for bread? Who's going to give you gold for bread?
Yeah.
So anyway.
That was my next question, actually. A society without some sort of currency, do you think
there
that's
will always
possible?
be a currency, but it may just change. It could be intention. It could be goodness. It could be love. The currency could be anything. In some ways, we do, as woo-woo as it is and harder to track, we do trade in other currencies. I think the greatest currency that we live in now is attention.
Right.
We're just so immature that we're squandering our attention, which is probably one of the reasons why we have a mental health issue. There's like 6 of them.
Yeah.
But one of them is we don't know how to control our attention as a race. Not yet.
If your kid told you they were having some mental health issues, what would you advise them?
Get outside. Now, before I answer this, let me create context. Do I believe that there are serious biochemical things that people can be confronting and dealing with? Yes. Do I think our society is producing that at large? Probably. Is there genetic reasons? Probably. But for the vast majority of people, whether they're a kid, whether they're an adult, if you are struggling with anxiety, which is fear of the future, depression, which is largely fear of or sadness of the past, Just do a handful of things and then check back in with me. And this won't work for everybody. I recognize that. There are exceptions to this. But the vast majority of people that have just done this protocol are like, wow, I do feel a lot better. Get outside more. Get real sun. Get off your phone and have real conversation with people. Turn off or kill your TV. Get rid of your TV. Eat real food, right? Stay away from processed stuff. Go to bed at a decent time.
It's such
Get
simple
sleep.
advice.
But it's so simple, and yet, especially in our Western civilization, most of that isn't being done. And then we wonder why, right? So I'd start there. Then if you're doing all those things and you still are struggling, okay, well, let's take it another layer deep. But let's start there.
Yeah.
And the problem is there's far more money in going, oh, let's just give you a pill for this. We got a pill for everything because there's money in it.
Right.
There's lots of unintended consequences, by the way, because the other problem is if you create something that treats the symptom but not the problem, eventually the problem comes back tenfold because you didn't deal with the underlying issue.
Look at Ozempic.
Yeah, Ozempic is a great example. Skinny fat is a big thing where like back in the, I don't hear about this as much, but liposuction was a thing for a while.
I remember that.
Right? It was a fad. And then people started realizing, well, we never addressed the underlying issue of overeating and eating the wrong food. So now the person just looks healthy, but they're not. When you're unhealthy, that your body is trying to communicate with you, hey, something needs to happen. When suddenly you haven't changed your behavior, but you look better, now you think it's okay.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
People want a quick solution.
100%.
Yeah. It's easy to want that.
We worship at the altar of nowism. We want everything now, which is a grand fallacy. And most of us recognize the things that we value most, we didn't get right away.
100%.
The things worth valuing, we worked for.
Daily.
For
years.
Right? And same with relationships. Like I think about my wife and I have been married 16, 17 years.
Wow.
And it's hilarious to me that like nobody's going to replace my wife. There's 17 years of history there. Do you know what I mean? It's not like that's not just, and it's not just history. I don't think just because you've been with somebody for 17 years is a good reason to continue to be with them. But it's all the we overcame together.
Right.
It was all the things we built together. It's all the shared experience, right? That's not replaceable with something now.
No, definitely not. I'm a believer in family unit. There's too many studies on single parenting and how it affects the kids.
Startling.
It's startling. I mean, 90% of violent crimes are committed by single parent households.
Yeah, no.
Crazy.
Yeah. And there's probably a lot of reasons for that. And as we evolve as a community, we may go back to something that's more akin to the old saying that it takes a community to raise, or it takes a village to raise a family. But no doubt there is, when you're, especially as a single mom, it is disproportionately heavy on single moms. I was surprised to see, I double checked the stat a few different places because I was a little bit shocked by it, but single dads actually fare better than single moms.
Really?
Pretty dramatically.
Why do you think that is?
My venture to guess is that our society still is structured to favor masculine productivity, and so they don't struggle as much with, they're better equipped to deal with providing. And providing, the inability to provide is where a lot of that stress comes that has people turning to crime and violence. The other one is obviously love and nurturing, but getting people out of poverty goes a long ways towards solving for that. It just happens to be that a lot of single moms fall into poverty because it's insanely hard to raise children as a single parent in our society right now.
Right, because if you have to work and parent, live off that minimum income.
So you can isolate it to, you can isolate it to single parents, but then you can go down to single moms and then go down to income. And you'll notice income is the biggest common denominator in that. Not all of it, by the way, not all of it. But, and so that's just, I've thought about this a few different ways, but the masculine is probably better equipped to deal with that hardship and with providing, which would probably eliminate a lot of the stress. Not all of it, but a lot of it.
So you think men are better dealing with that kind of stress?
Men were designed to provide and to protect. It's built into the, I know there's probably people offended by that, but it's hard to argue with it.
Can't argue data.
You can't, we can't, and also like just pure observation.
Right.
Like it's funny that there's trying to be sensitive here, but men are faster. They're stronger by design. Are there exceptions? Could you take the most phenomenal female athlete and have her compete with an average dude and she may whip their Yes.
Yeah.
But you're taking the best against the average. Take the most elite male against the most elite female. And most of my elite female friends don't even argue this point. They're like, yeah, It's obvious.
Right.
Which is why when we have people changing their sex to go compete with women, we're like, oh, we may not want, maybe we don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But it's just, and to me, that isn't a value statement. It's like trying to argue that you're trying to use a race car to be a truck. They're designed for different things, right? A truck is designed for hauling and pulling, right?
Yeah.
An exotic car is designed for a completely different experience, right? So, and then to compare one to the other, they're not qualitatively different, in my opinion. They're functionally different.
Right.
Right? To me, that's the sexes. They're functionally different.
Yeah.
And we have a bigger issue if we try to pretend that they're not.
Yeah. No, I agree. And from my experience, I'll just speak from my experience, people get pissed, but women are a lot more sensitive emotionally. So I think dealing with stress, is tougher on them. On the flip side, I bottled that in for years and it wrecked me. So you got to be able to express it too.
100%. And by the way, women are tough as nails. My partner had had our son 6 months ago at home birth.
Wow.
No meds, and his head was in the 99th percentile, and he was 10.5-pound baby.
Holy crap.
So hopefully anything I said wasn't in any way insinuating that women aren't tough. They're crazy tough. To be able to have a child is a different level of, like, I don't think men can even, we don't have a way to even get our head around that, literally or figuratively. But we're designed for different things. You want nurturing, right? You want comfort. You want love. That's the feminine expression, and you want the masculine. They're both really important. And by design, they're at their best when they're working together and loving and accepting their differences, not pretending they don't exist or weaponizing the differences or trying to act like we're all the same, right?
Right.
That's the dysfunction in our society that's going to weed itself out, because as time goes on, those lies will become more and more evident as society just continues to become more up, which is why I'm excited about it, because I think Napoleon got credit for the quote. At least he's the one I remember saying it. Probably somebody else did too, but it's to never interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake. I don't necessarily like the word enemy, but principally what you can get at there is, if somebody is so certain that what they believe is true, don't try to argue with them. Let them show you the fruit of their belief system.
Right.
So fundamentally, when getting coaching, whatever you're trying to get coaching in, make sure the person you're getting coaching from has the life you want in that particular area. The fruit of their life will bear out their belief system. They don't have to tell you. You'll see it. Are they loving? Are they peaceful?
Yeah.
I'll pick on my granola friends for a second, but I don't know how many of my friends that are all organic and only eat clean are stressed the out, or like they look like nervous wrecks and they're worried about everything they're eating. And like, that's not a quality of life I want.
No.
Right? And so I look at that and I'm like, well, I can't subscribe to your belief system. I can see it in your energy field. I don't want that. Right?
Yeah.
I want to be around people that are full of life and peace and love. And that is a choice. Right? And that can be hard for people to accept. So for me, I just look at the fruit of somebody's life and their energetic field, and that'll tell me most of what I need to know about how they're showing up in the world.
Do you think everyone has the ability to read energetic fields?
Yes. We just mute it. Usually as kids. It's like,
Really?
look at a child, like Jackson, my 6-month-old son. All he wants to do is connect with people. And because he can't communicate, the only way he can do it is eye contact. So he'll give you the most intense just moments of eye contact. And I've seen people laugh. I've seen people begin to cry. I've seen people shut down, because we all want that, right? It's that a moment of connection. And so children are really good at this because they haven't been indoctrinated yet up to a certain age, or not profusely yet anyway. And so they don't judge people so much on their actions, but their energy.
Wow.
Also animals.
Dogs, right?
Dogs, right?
Yeah.
They're judging people less on their actions and more their energy.
I actually didn't do a business deal with someone because he came over to my house, and my dog has never done this, by the way, before, but ran away from him, both of them.
Dude, I don't blame you. At the end of the day, I would say always trust your gut. Now, in doing so, will you be wrong? Yes. But that's how you're going to learn. Was that really my gut? What did I mess up there? The worst thing you could do is to say I'm trusting my intuition, lie to yourself because it was actually something else, not your intuition, and then not learn from it. But if somebody says this deal doesn't feel right, even if it's with me, I'll be like, then don't do it. If something feels off, don't do it.
Yeah.
Because that's how you're going to learn about yourself. That's how you become more aware.
For sure.
What happens is, for many reasons, we we mute that voice, or we turn it off, and then we really get lost.
Yeah,
Right?
I think you can turn it off easily when there's money involved. So when you see an offer on paper, your
Or
gut's
whatever
telling
it
you
is.
not to do it.
Or whatever it is we want. Also, there are times where if we have bad programming, a really good deal will turn us off because we don't know how to show up in good deals, right? Or bad boyfriends or bad girlfriends or whatever it is.
Right.
And then back to what you were saying, I wanted to come back to this. Women are generally more emotionally mature and emotionally intelligent.
Yeah.
Men, especially in Western society, have been taught from a very young age that boys don't cry, right? We don't show emotion.
Yep.
And so to your point, what you're saying is exactly right. What ends up happening, I see this a lot with my male clients, is they're storing energy all over their body because they never processed it. And when you're younger, you're pretty vital, so your body will protect you from it. But if you start looking at people, let's say 50, 60, 70, you can see what energy they've held for long periods of time because it literally begins to shape their body. They become more hunched over. They hold more weight in their lower abdomen.
Right.
Like where you hold energy over time has an impact on your body.
Wow.
And so becoming emotionally clean and clear is really important for men and women. And women are generally better at that. I'm making a generalization there, of course, and there are exceptions. But my experience has been, I would say, that women tend to understand that inherently better than men.
That's good to know. What's the process for getting an energy cleanse? People watching.
Acknowledging what you're experiencing. So when I'm working with my clients, one of the first things I'll tell them is label your emotions. And dudes are usually like, ugh, anger. I'm like, okay. And sometimes anger is your worldview is something I love or value is being taken from me, right? Or being challenged. Sadness is something I value or loved I've lost. So see, they're very close. So a lot of times dudes will express sadness as anger. Right? And that's that you can tell there's a very low level of intelligence or emotional intelligence is everything becomes anger. And that's the only emotion they know how to express. And now that becomes their fuel of choice for how they show up in the world. So when they want to get done, they get angry. Well, there are times where anger can be a very useful emotion. I'm not against anger at all. There's also times when that is not the most beneficial emotion to use. Right? You'll cause more harm than good.
Right.
But if you're not emotionally intelligent, you don't know how to use the right tool. You'll use the only one you know. So one of the ways is to acknowledge your emotion. I like to get them to touch the part of their body that they're feeling the emotion in. Hey, where are you feeling this right now? And then let's create space to release it.
Got it.
I'm not a doctor. I don't play one on the internet. But if under the right conditions and facilitated by a professional, I think psychedelics are doing a hell of a lot for people to get these resets quicker.
Ketamine therapy.
Ketamine, psilocybin. A lot of people are going into the jungles of wherever to experience ayahuasca.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of good ones. And I'm very hopeful for that space. I think the resurgence of psychedelics is going to be mostly good for humanity.
I love it. I can't wait to see it. Hopefully Big Pharma allows it, but we'll see.
No, they're not. It's not. It's when you can go. This is John Hopkins released a study that the efficacy of 3 psilocybin treatments was something like it was over 80%.
Wow.
And it was just 3.
That's
and it would
crazy.
last for 6 to 9 months. Your common SSRI is 2% over the placebo, right? Placebo, I think, is at 36 or 37%, somewhere in there. So you're at 39%, 38%, somewhere in there. Less than 40%. And you have to take it every day.
Daily, sometimes twice a day.
It's just disgusting.
Yeah, it's nuts.
And I do think there are people that probably are better on meds.
Yeah.
I'm not a doctor. I don't play them on the internet. But it's the go-to. And that's foul.
Yeah,
And
agreed.
it's big business that makes it go-to. Oh, take this daily thing where you could take, with the right treatment, take it 3 times and you're good for a year. And we're treating anxiety, depression, PTSD with it. So I'm huge on that space, but it isn't going to be profitable for Big Pharma.
Yeah.
And that's a problem because we're again, going back to conscious capitalism. When everything becomes about money, we're
Yeah. It's good to shift that perspective in people watching this. Anything you want to close off with, man?
I think overall, I'm very optimistic about where we're going as humans at this time in history,
Love
and
it.
I'm certainly here for it. I think we're in a potentially scary time in that I can't think of one major institution that isn't being challenged and we're not skeptical of. Right? I can't think of one. Our banking system, our government, capitalism, our medical system, academia, marriage, religion. Which one of them isn't being deeply questioned by not just there's always been questioning, but like pervasively.
Right.
Where like there's so much skepticism in the world. And part of the reason is, I think, is we have arrived at a point in human history where we are about to go through a massive evolution in consciousness, a shift in consciousness. And what has gotten us this far isn't going to get us to the next level. But because the next level isn't totally clear yet, we know we don't want more of this. We're just not sure what we want more of. That part isn't clear. So we have one foot in two different worlds.
Right.
And that, of course, is always a very shaky, scary, uncertain time. But I think what we need to do as humanity is lean into each other and really begin to know and understand ourselves by becoming more aware and showing up. I think the greatest gift we can give each other right now is our own personal development, which is working on ourselves, understanding who we are, understanding how we're showing up, and probably unlearning a lot of the that we've been indoctrinated with. But don't throw out the truth just because it's inconvenient.
Right.
Which we see a lot of that, right?
100%.
I think we asymptotically approach perfection, right? We're constantly trying to replace our lowercase t truths with higher lowercase t truths. I don't know that we, as humans, ever get to a point where we're fully expressed capital T truth all the time. But if you just start to become more obsessed with truth than right and wrong, your life will change.
Love it, man. Where can people find you?
Sabastian Enges on all platforms.
Perfect. We'll link it below. Thanks for coming on, man.
Awesome. Thank you, brother.
Thanks for watching. We'll need a part 3 eventually, but otherwise, see you guys tomorrow.